It's an honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Buyske. Dr. Buyske is the CEO and the president of the American Board of Surgery. She attended medical school at Columbia University and completed her general surgery training at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. She began her career at the Leahy Clinic and then was elected the American Board of Surgery director in 2006, serving for 2 years before being hired as associate executive director. During her time at ABS, Dr. Buyske served at the board of directors also of the American Board of Medical Specialties, representing our voice as surgeons to various specialties. She was instrumental and continued to do so to improve ABS policies with residence flexibility while in training, just to name a few, along with the rollout of the EPA. Dr. Buyske has served as past president of SAGES, the Society of American Gastro and Endoscopic Surgeons as well. She was previously the chief of surgery and director of MIS at Penn Presbyterian Medical Center in Philadelphia, and associate professor of surgery. She remains clinically active. Her areas of interest are minimally invasive surgery and general and GI surgery as well. On a personal note, I want to thank you again for a highly dynamic and engaging fireside chat yesterday and with the meetings. Special thanks to Dr. Castling and Dr. Sassy for moderating and engaging fireside chat. Many of the comments made resonates with me. In the one-on-one that we've had, Dr. Buyske never flashed her phone, didn't check the phone, took extensive notes. I don't know how many of you can do that, but this is a sign of an outstanding leader who's able to bring focus, and we spoke about that yesterday at the fireside chat as well. I also, what resonated as well, the comment made that I heard, if you're bold enough to put a scalpel on someone, you should be bold enough to take action of your life and figuring out what to do. And my response is amen to that, Dr. Buyske as well. And we're going to put you on the spot again to repeat the Buyske rules of engagement as well. I think they're very important as well. Today, Dr. Buyske is going to talk to us about culture change. It's an honor and privilege to have you. At the end, I'm going to invite Dr. Savolas to give you the DLS plaque as well. Dr. Buyske, it's a pleasure to have you.
Well, I want to thank you all for inviting me here. I had a wonderful day yesterday. This is a hotbed of energy, optimism, creativity, and really a platform for change that was inspiring, really eye-opening, and I learned a lot of things that I didn't already know. So I feel a little bit in giving this talk that I'm bringing coals to Newcastle, because you have the organizational structure, the right people in place, and the support to get things done, which is really what this conversation is about. All of you are going to have lots of options in your lives about where you want to commit your time, both your professional time and your volunteer time. And I want to persuade you that you need to find the places where you can work at your highest and best function. And if you can't find the places that are like that, that you need to make the places that are like that. Because you won't always be in this department. You won't always have this leadership. You won't always be quite this lucky. And therefore, you have to be intentional about finding these places and creating these places. We underwent a big organizational redesign at the American Board of Surgery several years ago. And part of the impetus for that was that we got smart, devoted, committed people into the room, really some of the highest and best minds in the country. And we would have these fabulous think tank retreats and come up with great ideas, and nothing ever changed. It was just this sort of extraordinary waste of opportunity. And a few really visionary leaders, I was not among them, looked at that and said, we have got to do better. We've got to create a better structure to take advantage of what we have here. So I want to tell you the story of how that happened, and just also to make the point that there's organizational structure, there's management structure, there's people at the table, and it goes all the way down to the little details of how a meeting is run when you want to get things done and when you want to make change. So I'm going to start with a story. Several years ago, people started talking about, oh, the residents aren't ready to go into practice after their 5 years of training. And we're very specific about what those 5 years of training are supposed to look like. 60 months, 48 weeks, and a month. what is a week? What is a week if you work on the weekend? What is a week if you work 80 hours? We had a lot of details and rules about all that, but we decided to take a really closer look at how those rules were being lived. How much of the 48 weeks were you spending interviewing? Were you going to conferences? Were you taking vacation? Were you doing other things? Not because we wanted to change anything, but just so we knew what we were talking about, so we could compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And one of the things that we noticed was that we actually asked people to turn in kind of calendars of every day that they worked. And one of the things that came up was that the vast majority of residents were working on June 30th. And then on July 1st, they were at a fellowship hundreds of miles away, perhaps in another state. And so, not questioning the veracity of that report, but wondering if it was true, if it were true even some of the time, how ridiculous is that? So I don't like things that don't make any sense. And I really hate rules that exist on paper and don't have a real application. And that's really been a through theme for me in leadership. Whenever I identify something that's written down, but it's not the way things are going, or it's written down and it doesn't make sense, or it's written down and it is the way things are going and it's irrational or unfair, I like to change them. So in this case, that was obviously, as we talked about last night, bonkers. You can't expect anybody to go do that. Maybe they're relying on their family. Probably they're relying on their family. Probably at least some of it is exaggerated. So we wanted to look into changing that. So I started talking about it. I like to play a really long game. It was not my nature. I was a quick moving person. I was very impulsive. I was somewhat erratic for a long time. And then when I became a surgeon, all of those characteristics were sort of emphasized. And when I started working more in administration, it became necessary to play a much longer game. So over the years, I've learned how to be much more strategic and start to use chess pieces. And one of those is for culture change. You have to move slowly. So I just started talking about it at meetings. I'd say, what do you think about the fact that the trainees are trying to move across the country, finish a residency, study for their exams, start a new fellowship with no time from midnight to 6 a.m. And usually that would just start a conversation about how I did it, what it was like for me when I did it at the time. And I'd say, well, what if we just move the fellowship start dates back for a month or a couple of weeks? And that never went well. People would start expostulating, perhaps even shouting, that's ridiculous, we can't do it. The programs have to onboard everybody at the same time, can't happen. And I go, okay, and just drop it. So you have to figure out sort of what the facts are that can support your argument and figure out what the tools are in your toolbox. And one really important tool was that orthopedic surgery had been doing that for the last 20 years. Their fellowship started on August 1st. So I knew that, and I knew it was a really important tool, but I also knew that nobody really cared. What they really wanted at that moment in time was to tell me that it wasn't possible. The other thing that's important to know is that I had exactly no control over the situation. There's no fellowship start date central. There's no organization that says when all these things happen. It had to be a game of persuasion and not a game of sort of force. So it's the long game. I call this phase sort of throwing gum at the wall and see if it sticks. Just sort of throw it out, see what the reaction is, and then back away. Don't let it turn into a confrontation. Just say, okay. When I say, okay, you've got a problem. So I brought it up again a second time, maybe a year later in a similar setting. So, well, what if we actually tried to move the start date? And at that point, people started saying, well, it's not possible. The residents would have to go without a salary for a month. How will that work? They won't have health insurance. What will we do? We're gonna have to pay, one group of fellows for 13 months, make them stay on extra. And at that point, I said, well, you know what? I will find out how orthopedic surgery does it because they've been doing it for the last 20 years and we can talk about it then. And that also fell into sort of a resounding silence of resentment. So those are the tools I had. I knew it was possible. I knew we'd had the discussion twice now. Nobody had taken a vote and no one had shot the whole thing down. But I needed to get everybody sort of lined up together. And so the last round was the third try. And the third try is usually the magic try. When I said, orthopedic surgery does it, we make exceptions for onboarding for visas. Staff gets onboarded all year round. What if we use the tools that are at my disposal and change the date of the qualifying exam? So I offered a treat. I offered a bribe because the fellowship directors, if you're fellowship people in the room, you know that the trainees show up. They immediately ask for a week off before their qualifying exam. Back when we had the qualifying exam in August, they'd want a week off. They'd be desperately studying for it. They'd be distracted, not learning what they were trying to learn during their fellowships. So if we move the qualifying exam into July, move the fellowship start dates to the end of July, all of that could sort of be resolved. So we did that. We did it before there was any agreement to move the dates. We just moved the qualifying exam to the middle of July. So it wouldn't interfere with fellowship if you chose to move your fellowship afterwards. And that's what happened. It just sort of went, the fellowships started meeting as groups. First, the pediatric surgeons all agreed to move, then the trauma surgeons. Now, again, there's no fellowship central, so any given fellowship doesn't have to do it. But the vast majority of fellowships that are sort of under our purview now start at the beginning of August. It was a multi-year phenomenon. There was no single vote taken about it. We use the tools that are at our disposal and the power of being the CEO of the American Board of Surgery, which means I get to be in the rooms where I can talk about these things. So it is important to make sure that you know what is within your provenance if you're going to try to make change. You can't really boil the ocean. We talked about this yesterday in terms of your research initiatives that are focused on rural access to care, not about every single possible research initiative under the sun. I'm sure that there is other research going on at the institution, but within the Department of Surgery, having an actual focus, having boundaries around what you're trying to do allows you to actually move forward. It's like the bumpers in a bowling alley. The balls don't go everywhere. They're all headed in one direction, and sooner or later, you're going to get all those pins down. So you need the boundaries. So we had never had a strategic plan at the American Board of Surgery. So I decided early as a CEO that we were going to have a big strategic plan, and we were going to pick the direction we wanted to go in, and we were going to put boundaries in it and not try to solve every problem. And we were also going to figure out what we had control over and what we didn't. So a good strategic plan will do that for you. We spent a ton of money. We had outside experts. We interviewed people from all kinds of different departments, old directors, new directors, the societies, the ACGME, and we set a five-year course. And halfway through the strategic planning, I got a call from the very good consultants, and they said, we need to meet with you. Your current governance structure will not support the kind of decision-making and plan that you want to make. So that was kind of an interesting dilemma for me. So that's what the board looked like. That's not the actual board. It's just a sort of, in fact, Jennifer might be in that picture somewhere. And the first thing that you would notice is that it's really big. That's a lot of people in the room. It's actually too many people to make good decisions. When you have that many people in the room, you can kind of get away with opening up your laptop and checking your email while people are having a conversation. You might not read all the material before you come to the meeting because surely someone else is going to read all the material. You can rely on your colleagues to make good decisions and just vote along with it. The responsibility is diffused. The sense of ownership is diffused. It's not a good practice to have this many people when you're trying to make good decisions. And I'm talking about a board here, but the same thing applies to committees, to organizations, to any place that you're trying to make decisions, move things forward, and create change. So what they said is that we were committing the 7 deadly sins of ineffective organizations. The first is representational governance. So you have to decide who you want to be at the table. And how do you decide? Most organizations, pretty common, you're trying to make a decision in the hospital, you say, well, we need the chief of medicine, we need the chair of surgery, we need someone from infectious disease, and we need someone from the pediatric hospital. What you have then is a bunch of people who are going to represent the interests of the group that they represent, as opposed to being assigned, committed to thinking of the greater good. So we had representational governance. All of the societies involved in surgery, or very many of them, 40 of them to be exact, were allowed to send us directors. They actually had to send us 3 choices, and we would elect them, but we couldn't actually pick people according to what we needed. So representational governance, people who are picked by their title, by their job description, not necessarily by their skills. We're going to go through each one of these individually, so I'm not going to read them all from this slide, but the 7 deadly sins of ineffective organizations, and we were suffering from all of them. So appointment by title, allocated seats. We're going to have a committee, and we're going to make sure that half of the committee comes from cardiothoracic surgery. So any kind of delegation like that, as opposed to having what's called competency-based membership, which means you say, in order to make this decision, we need this set of skills at the table. So if we wanted to make a decision, say, about changing the assessment system to EPAs, we would need people who are expert in EPAs. We would need people who are good at change management. We would need people who are program directors on our front line. We would probably need program administrators also. So instead of saying we want the president of the Association of Program Directors in Surgery, and we want the head of surgical education at the American College of Surgeons, we say we want people with these skills. And you get an entirely different population of people. And usually they're kind of excited to be picked for their skills as well. So getting rid of the idea of titled representational governance or selection and moving instead to competencies. And this is an example of our biggest body of leadership at the American Board of Surgery, which is the council, which is sort of a think tank, a reflector pool, the boots on the ground leadership in surgery that used to come from the American Surgical Association would send us 3 names, and we had to pick one of the 3. And it didn't matter if what we needed was someone who was a skilled communicator to help us with change management. We only had those 3 people. They were great people, but their skills are probably going to be better served somewhere else. So make a list of all the things that you hope for and identify the people who are going to be good representatives of those skills. And that list has got to change over time. If you have, we need people with expertise in EPAs, guess what now? 10 years later, we're the expert in EPAs. We don't necessarily need to invite people from elsewhere, so we don't need that seat at the table so much. So making sure that you have the skills in the room, you and your research initiative. You need people who can write grants. You need people who can identify funding. You need people who can go out into the community. You need people who come from the community to tell you about the issues that they're going to have implementing these situations. It's not by title, it's by skills. And this is what Jennifer was asking about last night. Not only do you want the people with the skills, but someone needs to be able to tell you that these people have the characteristics to come to the table and have a good conversation. It doesn't mean they need to agree with you. In fact, you want them to not agree with you at least some of the time. You always need dissenters in the room, but it's pretty basic. I said some of this is actually a little bit mundane: meeting hygiene, manners, reliability, courtesy. So when you pick these people, you want to make sure that they're reliable, that they're actually going to come. And if you pick people by title, they might not necessarily feel like they're going to come. If they know you picked them for their skills, then they feel obliged to show up because they have to bring their skills to the table. Their title doesn't matter so much. So people who are actually going to come, they're going to show up. They stay to the end of the meeting. They're not the person who takes their suitcase and is like, I have to catch a flight, leaving early. That they can disagree without being disagreeable. So not belligerent, not causing an argument, not taking a stand, but are able to say that they disagree in the room so that you can have a debate, that they're discreet, that they're able to keep confidence. They're not tweeting out everything that happens in the meeting. They're taking pictures of the screen. You can take pictures of the screen if you want. That's okay. And also last is that they're loyal, that there's no light between the shoulders. We have a lot of education around what it means to sit at the table at the ABS. We have to do it over and over again because there is this kind of funny myth like, didn't we already talk about this? But it turns out you talked about it 4 years ago and the table has changed. People have moved on. Some people didn't hear it, or at least the majority of the people in the room didn't know it. So you have to say this sort of thing over and over again. So no light between the shoulders means argue as much as you want when you're in the room. And before you join the room, you have to agree that if the vote goes against you, you're not going to step out of the room and say, that was the stupid decision I ever heard. I voted against it. I think they're doing the wrong thing. You have to agree with this body of people. And sometimes for a really important decision, it's helpful to decide ahead of time what you want the vote to be. So we have 13 directors, the governing board of the American Board of Surgery. So if we're going to do something really significant, like say, elect a new chair of the American Board of Surgery who's not a surgeon, right? That would be very dramatic, right? We might want someone with special skills that are embodied in one of the directors who's not a surgeon. So that would be a hard thing to decide. And people in the room might feel very strongly about it. And maybe a 7-6 vote isn't quite enough for the dissenters. They may feel like, wow, that didn't go right on a different day. That would be wrong. So it's not just the decision for a supermajority. It's like, I've worked with these people for years. How about if 8 people vote opposite me? Would I feel okay going along with it then? Maybe not. It's really important. What about if 9 people vote opposite me? What about 10? How many of my peers have to take the opposite decision for me to say, okay, I get it. I still disagree, but I'm willing to go along with it. So having that discussion before you make a really important decision, what's the number of the vote that's going to make everybody feel comfortable if it doesn't go your way, is really valuable. So no light between the shoulders. You have to agree to support the group when you leave the room. If you really can't support the group, you can leave the group, but you can't go and badmouth them. And a sort of codicil to that is to not have any cabals in these important decisions, committee decisions, research decisions, governance decisions. And that means that you don't leave the room and say, you want to come talk to me for a second? I think they're making a mistake, and here's why. Because people can only make a good decision if they have all of the same information. So you say, I think we're making a mistake, and here's why. And let people rebut you and let everybody have an open conversation. So when it does come to a vote, you all heard the same conversation and are working with the same information. No sidebars, no little side agreements, no cabals, open conversation, agree at the table. That's the sort of cleanest, highest, fairest form of decision making. So those are the characteristics, the reliable characteristics. We used to call them the critical attributes of Buyske: reliable, amiable, discreet, loyal. Second deadly sin, lack of mission focus. We start every one of our meetings by reading the mission at every level of the organization: board meetings, council meetings, specialty board meetings, committee meetings, item writer meetings. Every meeting starts by reading the mission statement. Sometimes we pick someone else in the room to read the mission statement. Not that long ago, one of the committees asked one of my staff to read the mission statement, and they almost cried. They were so moved by the opportunity to talk about, to read sort of the purpose of the whole thing. So keeping the mission in line is really important. It's also legal. If you're a nonprofit, you're only allowed to do work that's directly in line with your mission. And if you get revenue from or spend money significantly outside of your mission, you can actually get in trouble with the federal government and lose your nonprofit status. At the ABMS, the American Board of Medical Specialties, we started working in order to make money with countries around the world to help them develop exam processes that were similar to ours, because ours are really, really good and recognized that way worldwide. So working with Singapore, we also work with Qatar and a few other countries, but we didn't have international relationships or international exam development as part of the mission of the ABMS. And so we actually had to rewrite the mission statement. So it's a real thing. It's not just a feel-good thing. It's a legal thing. It's reported on the 990 for everybody to look at. And anyone who's mad at you can actually check and see where you're making your money and get you in trouble. So mission focus. So our mission, American Board of Surgery, serves patients, society, and the specialty of surgery by providing leadership in surgical education and practice and ensuring excellence through a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture. The periods. I hate the periods on this slide. I take it off every chance I get, and they keep coming back. I'm an English major. That's like a sentence fragment. It's a bullet point. There's not supposed to be a period there. Will you remind me to call someone about that later? Okay. Diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture, rigorous evaluation and assessment, and promoting the highest standards for professionalism, lifelong learning. And I can't see the rest of it. And the surgeons and the management of surgeons in practice. So we read that every time, and we remember that. And we actually think about how the decisions we're making are employing that. Your mission statements: to improve the human condition with a diverse body of students, faculty, and staff who provide excellence in educating learners, healthcare professionals, and the public, advancing knowledge and providing comprehensive patient care. And we make the healing presence of God known in our world by improving the health of the people we serve, especially those who are vulnerable, while we advance social justice for all. And I heard a lot of that in the meetings yesterday. All the work that you were doing is fulfilling your mission directly in line. It's kind of nice to remember to be mission driven. And it's kind of nice the way that all those missions flow together, right? We're all working the same way in healthcare. So I just encourage you to keep that in mind. One good practice is to ask people at the beginning of a meeting if they could just write down the mission and then collect the pieces of paper, see what happens. If nobody knows, you might want to try a little bit harder. So resisting change, it's pretty easy to put a group together, spend a lot of time, and have nothing actually happen. And why does that happen? Meetings default to what's familiar and easy, a whole series of people presenting reports about what they did last year, last month, not about spending enough time talking about what they're going to do next year, next month. So committee reports are sort of the death of progress. If you can read it, then don't say it. Put it in something written. Use your precious time together to think strategically, to think generatively, to have future-facing discussions. Representational governance, that will keep you in exactly the same relationships that you've already been in. And then inadequate information, not actually having a diverse enough group of people at the table to get different opinions, different life experience, to help you make good decisions. One of the big changes at the board, and we talked about this last night, was it was historically really a very academic environment. It was useful for promotion. You had a team of people to help you take care of your patients. Your income wasn't really significantly changed by being away from home 15, 20, 25 days a year for long periods of time. And then there was just sort of this idea that, well, of course, it's about education, it's about research, it's an academic thing. And so when we had 40 directors, we used to have a discussion about the candidates. And I was in the room early on, and there were two final candidates from the list of three from one of the societies. And somebody said, well, this one has 250 publications, and this one only has 25. So we should pick the one with the 250 publications. And I just had this light bulb. I was like, everybody in this room has 250 publications. How many of those people do we need? If that's a requirement, let's just put that on the list. If everybody has to look exactly the same, how about if we think about the person with only 25? How about if we take some people with no publications? Because most of the surgeons in this country have never written a paper. And we're making rules for people that we have no line of sight to. So let's make sure we get a couple of people who haven't written a paper, who have only written 25, who live a different life, but are taking care of patients and are having to abide by our rules and guidelines. So that was really an aha moment. And that was a shift to competencies, right? It wasn't just academic surgeon by title. It was, what are the skills that you can bring to the table that will help us better understand what benefits the diplomates, what benefits the public, and who those people are, which you can only tell if you get the information and you have non-representational governance. I love it when people tell me, we sort of describe some of our rules: disagree without being disagreeable, no light between the shoulders, have to cede to the majority vote. And people are like, I've been on lots of boards. It's like, hey, you've been on lots of bad boards. This is not helpful. So just, pause and listen to a better way of moving things forward. So the history, a lot of the societies have boards and they have tons of committees. I think SAGES has got like 50 committees. And it's exciting to be asked to be on a committee, especially when you're sort of trying to ascend. And then they ask you to be on the board one day and it's like, thank you. You just really, at most, you'll ask what the time commitment is, right? But a board is a legal entity. Being on a board of directors makes you financially, reputationally, and survival of the organization legally responsible. So when you're asked to be on the board of your local swim club or your local library, you better be sure that you actually understand what you're taking on. I did not know that. I was on several society boards and I just thought it was an honor. I was just thrilled with the opportunity. So when we formed our original new board of directors, I had to call everyone and invite them, ask them to be on the board. And out of 13 people, one person said, I would like to see your strategic plan. And I would like to see your financial statement. And I was like, you are exactly the person that we need. I also was like, oh no, he's going to see our financial statement and he's going to say, forget it. Because we were actually in some degree of financial disarray at the time. But he said, I see you have a plan and we'll join the board. So if I have one piece of public service information, take being a director on a board really, really seriously. It's a legal obligation. You're responsible for the decisions of the organization. And then the other thing is the debate and conflict. You have the fear of debate and conflict. Debate is so important, so enriching. If there's no one in the room who's disagreeing with you, you don't have the right people in the room. You have to have people in there who are going to have a different perspective. And you don't have to all agree at the end of the day. You all just have to agree to disagree without being disagreeable. Not getting rid of people on your committee who aren't doing any work, who aren't showing up. That's a wasted seat. It decreases morale, makes other people wonder if they really have to show up. makes other people wondering if there's something good in the news because they seem to be spending all their time on their phone texting during the meeting. It increases the workload. So the same 3 people are doing all the work of the group, the research group, the committee. If other people aren't working it, you've got to actually ask them to leave. We're extremely polite at the American Board of Surgery when we ask people to leave. We don't even tell them we're asking them to leave. We send them a certificate. And we thank them for their service. And we don't ever point out that it's 2 years before the end of their term. Most people don't know how long their terms were going to be anyway. But you cannot let people who are not doing a good job kind of contaminate the energy, the excitement, the commitment of the rest of the room. And we have removed non-performing board members and committee members. Actually, I have a phone call to that effect next week. And then cumbersome or outmoded, we're doing this way because we've always done it this way. Well, we have to have the membership from the societies because we need the support of the societies. They won't support us anymore if we don't take the people that they want us to take. It's always been that way. So outmoded government structures, there's a science. There's a science to organization, to getting things done. And it changes. And you want to stay on top of whatever the best practices are right now. So too big is just doesn't work. It's expensive. It's cumbersome. You're going to have people who aren't involved. You're not even going to know that they're not involved because you can't tell because there's just too many people in the room. So what's an ideal number if you want people to be making decisions? It's pretty small. Could be as small as 7. Seems a little small to me. Could be as big as 20. But really much bigger than that, if you're trying to move things forward, is dysfunctional. So you have to really be sort of ruthless. What are the skills that we need in the room? Who has got the personal attributes that's going to move this forward, and who is actually showing up, staying engaged and committing, and we'll keep them there. So keeping old rituals just because you had them and not examining them is one of the 7 deadly sins of governance. Having a big group and then having an inner group that's actually running things. One of my favorite governance experts won't sit on a board if there's an executive committee. So if you have 20 people, 40 people who are theoretically making decisions, it's not going to work. So you're going to call a small group together when something urgent comes up, or when you need a last minute decision, or even just when you need an important decision. So you undermine the participation, the opinions, the value of the rest of the group. So having an internal club, an executive committee is what is usually officially called, is sort of dysfunctional. Standing reports, we already talked about. Representational membership, same thing. And the last thing is, what is the purpose of this group? What is your mission? What is your mission? Are you adhering to it? Have you drifted off of it? What is the scope of the work? How long are we going to be doing this? Am I committing to this for 6 years? Is this a 12-month? Is this a 6-week SWAT? So tell people, think about it yourself, not just like, let's get a group together to work on this, but how long do we expect this to take? What are we expecting from people? What are the skills that we need in the room? Who's in charge? Who's going to decide finally? I'm going to get a bunch of opinions. Do I decide, or are we all going to vote if we have to remove someone or we have to invite someone new? And if you're the person being invited, ask about what the job description is. What is the work of the committee? How long is it going to last? Who gets the final say? And how are you deciding on the membership? So be proactive in making these decisions. You don't have a lot of time. And in this sort of short life of ours, you want the time that you have to be effective. So make sure you're stepping into situations that are going to support that. And then the last thing that we did is we started to assign staff to all of our levels of leadership and committees, lifelong staff, people who knew the rules and function of the board, so that the volunteers didn't have to figure out integrate relationships, bylaws, rules, policies, who to contact. There's always a staff person there who will take that work for them, because the staff people can't make the strategic decisions or move things along. So I want people to work at their highest and best level, taking away all the administrative work by giving them really good, strong staff. That gives the staff a sense of a mission also. They like to be around the volunteers. It's very inspiring for them. So the highest and best use of our time, I'm going to get down into meeting hygiene, which sounds so dry, but it's so important that you just have to bear with me. So this is me when I was invited to be on a committee at SAGES, which was the first national committee I was on. I was so excited. And now I'll drop the SAGES reference because I actually model a lot of the work of the board on their structure because they're an incredibly effective society. So you get invited to go to the committee. You show up promptly for your 9 o'clock meeting. But, the chair of the committee is like, well, not everybody's here yet. We'll give them a couple more minutes. How was your weekend? And they sort of start a a casual conversation. So now it's 9:05 and you're kind of wishing that maybe you had stopped at the bathroom like you wanted to on the way into the meeting, but you wanted to be on time, so you didn't do that. So 5 minutes into the meeting, people show up. There's kind of no rules for the conversation. There's no really good written agenda. It turns into just a sort of free-for-all conversation, no boundaries, no direction, no one really controlling how the room is going. So we actually have very clear meeting hygiene rules, which is we start each meeting, actually I think I have a slide of it, so I don't want to read it again, talking about how we're going to run the meeting, how the meeting's going to go, how you're going to get called on. So in this case, in this scenario, people argue, they go off topic, there was no particular agenda, the meeting goes past time. I don't know about you, but I am done when the meeting's done. I am not interested anymore. I just want to know when they're going to really stop. So they go past time, they go, this is a really good meeting. We'll talk about this more again next month. Maybe I'm not going to come next month. I think of it as the Tower of Babel. Just sort of, they pulled smart people together to talk about a topic without really having a plan, and everybody was talking different languages with different agendas. So we actually have written rules for how we run a meeting, and we do it the same way every time. Jennifer's familiar with this from her long work with the board. Have an agenda, have a template. Start the meeting by reading the mission statement, the purpose of the committee, the reason for the meeting, the mission of the organization. Set the tone of the meeting. Ask everybody how they're going to refer to each other. You all know probably about the sort of implicit hierarchy in calling half the people in the room doctor and half the people in the room Susan, James, first name, maybe mispronouncing their first name, but not being consistent. Sets a kind of quiet hierarchy. And sometimes you're in a meeting where not all the people are doctors, and that's weird. Doctor, counselor, I don't know. So agree how you're going to call what you're going to call everybody and how you're going to do it. We're calling everyone doctor today because it's a very formal meeting. We're not going to use the term doctor because we're not all doctors in the room. So no one's going to get called doctor. We're just going to use first names today. So you set the tone and then you stick to it, use it consistency. Figure out how you're going to get a chance to talk. This is actually one of my favorite things. We provide name tags. We have a huge printing business where we're always like folding name tags for every meeting. And if you want to talk, you just take your tag, oops, none of these things move, and you turn it sideways on the table. And then everybody knows you want to talk. There might be 5 name tags up, but everybody's going to get called on. You don't have to have your hand up, waiting to be called on, trying to catch the chair's eye. Someone else talks over you, interrupts you, you don't get a chance. And eventually, if you're sort of retiring or bored or disempowered, you just put your hand down, you're not going to end up saying anything. Conversely, the people who are sort of aggressive and tend to be interrupting have also actually thanked me for this system because they don't feel like they need to interrupt. They know they're going to get a chance to say what they want to say. So we generally use turning the nameplate on their side, even in small meetings. And then the chair calls on you one at a time. On Zoom, obviously, you can use the little hand wave, but it's important to talk about it. No matter what technique you use, make sure that everybody uses it and just say, this is how you're going to be able to get a chance to speak during the meeting. We're very careful to use gender neutral language at the American Board of Surgery. We also try to use language that doesn't have discriminatory or racist history. A surprising amount of our language does. So we've tried to expunge that from our website, from our documents, from our meetings. And it's very friendly. We'll make small corrections. You'll just point out that you referred to, someone as a chairman when you could have said chair. And it's almost a little bit of a game, but it's generally friendly. And that's a good way to do it, just as an education point. For really important topics, we announced that people could only speak once. That makes you really think about what you're going to say if you're only going to be able to talk about it once. Keeps it from turning into a debate, an argument, yes but, no but, keeps 2 people from dominating in the room. Everybody in the room gets to speak on the topic once, and then we're going to take a vote, or then we're going to move on. We also decide whether we're going to use Robert's rules or not. If anybody actually knows Robert rules, please raise your hand. I think people love to invoke them, but no one actually knows anything about them. I do. And the last thing is it confidential or not? Can you take pictures of the slide and send them out on Twitter? Or is this something that's, best kept in this room and make it clear so that nobody's breaking rules without knowing it? We like to make our difficult decisions based on principles. If you say the why, that thing about the why instead of the how, Why are we doing it this way? Keep it at a very high level. So these are the principles for our meetings, that the chairs are trained on meeting hygiene so that they can run a fair and open meeting, so that the people that were selected because of their skills will all have a chance to talk, whether they're talkative or not, whether they're retiring or not, whether they're overly talkative or not. We want to set up the meeting because we pick these people specially, particularly to hear what they have to say. We always start with introductions. How many times have you been in a meeting where they're like, I think everybody here knows everybody, right? Should we just go ahead and get started? But you don't actually know everybody, but you don't want to raise your hand and look like the outsider in the room. Go, well, actually, I don't know everybody. Could you please introduce people? So unless you know, it's the fifth meeting you've all had together, always start with introductions. People like icebreakers. I'm actually not that friendly. I don't love icebreakers, but people tell me that they're really important and you should have icebreakers. So go ahead and have icebreakers at the beginning of your meetings. We usually do. And then be mindful of attribution. There is a meeting habit of someone maybe less powerful offers an opinion or a statement, kind of gets slid by, and someone else then says it again, and the second person gets credit. So in that circumstance, it behooves the chair or someone in the room to be like, I would like to hear more about what Chris said. Sort of anchor it back to the person who really brought up the idea. That's a little bit meeting 400 instead of 200, but I think it's really important to get the full participation of all those people that you so carefully selected and brought into the room. So these are the principles of just one of our committees who actually took the time to write down what the principles of the meeting were, that they respect the time of the volunteers, that they listen to all the voices and opinions using the techniques that we talked about, that the meeting's efficient, that it always has an agenda. It starts on time. Our meetings start at the 00 of the hour. And at about 58 or 59, the staff starts being like, should I text Jennifer? She's not here yet. It's like, the meeting hasn't started yet. We don't have to start calling people yet, but we start exactly on time. And you know what happens when you start exactly on time reliably? People show up exactly on time. Start 5 minutes late, they show up 10 minutes late. It's like a disease. It's efficient. You know, we have hand raising, we don't have debates, we don't have too much back and forth in the room, and it meets best practices. That we value diverse experience. We want different voices at the table. Not everybody has to have published 250 papers. If you have everyone who looks exactly the same, then you didn't need to have a meeting because you already know what's going to happen. Competency-based, we have the people with the skills we need in the room, and that you have an agenda and that you have goals for each meeting. I keep blinding myself here. That you know what the long-term and short-term goals of the committee are, and that everybody understands how long they're going to serve and when they're going to be done, so they can kind of bring their best selves and not start wondering how long this thing is going to go on. So a living example of that is during COVID, we didn't know what to do with our exams. The first thing that happened was we had the pediatric surgery exams at the end of March in 2020, in-person exam. The pediatric surgeon candidates themselves had already flown into town because there are all these, I call them the predatory test companies, show up in town ahead of time, scare all the trainees into thinking they can't possibly pass the exam unless they take a course, charge them $4,000, and then we give the exams. So the candidates would be in town for a week. They'd be paying for a hotel. So we had all the people who were going to take the exam were already there, but the examiners hadn't arrived yet. And we started getting phone calls that hospitals had put a travel ban, a term that we're all familiar with now, but had never heard at the time, that people weren't, examiners weren't going to be able to come. So we realized pretty early that it was going to impact all of our oral exams. And then we realized it was going to impact all of our written exams as well, because we brought everyone into Pearson centers to sit in a crowded room, to ride in an elevator, to breathe the same air. And so that's, survivable for us, but a problem for people who needed to move on with their careers. So we decided to base it on principles, so that as first principle, as a healthcare organization, we'll do our part to protect the public and our constituents from the spread of the virus. All the decisions need to be made through that lens. Therefore, all of our exams would have to be virtual. So logic follows from the principle. As much as possible, all the candidates' certification timelines should be kept intact so they can move on through their careers. Therefore, all the candidates in all of the specialties, no favorites, would have an opportunity to take some sort of virtual exam in 2020 and 2021. The action follows from the principle. And that all solutions for all examinations would need to be provided equitably for the candidates. There was some idea that people would be able to go back to their training institution and sit in the chair's office maybe and take the exam, or there were a lot of pop-up ideas for how to make it all happen. And so we made decisions about how to deliver the exams. We converted to an entirely virtual oral exam, as you probably know, and still do, for the ecologic and financial benefits and time benefits for the candidates and for the examiners. And then we had one, catastrophic implosion. Anybody take the 2020 qualifying exam? I'm sorry. But because we had developed these principles, we could look back and say, we did this for a reason. The application didn't work out, but we were following the principles of what we knew was right. And it also helped us with a path towards fixing it or remediating it later. So principles help you both when things work out and when things don't work out. I used to get a lot more hand raises. And the first time I asked that question, I was afraid. And then you have to get everybody to buy in on all this stuff. You have to get everybody to agree. You have to get them to agree that they're going to go with a vote that goes against them. You have to get them to agree that they're going to dispute in the room. You have to get them to agree that they're not going to talk in the taxi cab about how they want to overthrow this initiative that's happening around their back. You have to clarify the culture. And you have to make sure that the playing field is level by making sure that everybody has a chance to speak and has a chance to be there and be heard. So ongoing education, sitting down, talking about these things, not just assuming that everybody gets them and that everybody agrees with them or everybody thinks they're right. And if people really don't like them, they probably need to work somewhere else. So as the CEO, I'm really the face of the changes. I'm the face of convincing people that they want to work in this environment. I'm the face to all those societies who didn't have a seat at the board anymore. That was not a good year. The worst year was the year that the qualifying exam failed. I'll say that. That was probably the single worst experience of my CEO-ship. But so I had to learn how to manage a lot of these things as well. So when I first took this position 9 years ago, a lot of people sent me books. It was very touching. I was really I was happy that so many people were paying attention to my development. And then more people sent me even more books. And I started being like, okay, so you think I can't do any of this? I think I don't understand. I think I have about 40 leadership books at home. And they are really useful. So if you're the person that has to do it, reading them, you might have to read 200 pages to only get 2 or 3 good usable lessons. But if you read 40 books and you get 2 or 3 usable lessons out of them, you end up with a pretty good portfolio of ways of managing difficult conversations, getting people to buy in, surviving conflict. So reading actually is pretty valuable. Using role models who are good at change management. This is Tim Flynn. He was a chair of the board in my first position when I was associate executive director. He had a big initiative, a real game changer that was his passion project. And it was his last year. And I was very excited about it. And I was sitting at his right hand during the board meeting, like passing him notes. And he brought up the topic and we had a big open discussion with all 40 of the board of directors. And then he just said, okay, moving on to the next topic. And I was like, what just happened? And he said, I wasn't sure it was going to pass. And he said, you can never let it get to a no vote. If there's a no vote, you're done. So you have to kind of skid right past that. You have to live to throw the gum at the wall another day. You have to just go, okay, that was very useful feedback, and move on if you want to try to keep it alive, which is a very brand new thought to me. And I use it all the time now. This is Sam Sifton. He is one of the editors of the New York Times. He used to be the food editor. He's a very charming, engaging, energetic guy. His personality is just like it looks in this picture. I went to a reading. He gave a reading at the public library in Philadelphia. And shockingly, the discussion started off with a very aggressive, hostile question about food to Sam Sifton. It was kind of everybody in the room was like, what just happened? And he, instead of getting flustered or angry or diverting, and the moderator, who could have shut it down because it was really almost an attack, he goes, is this how we're going today? Bring it on. So they did actually have a discussion. They disagreed about some of the things that he had written. He kept the conversation going, and everything got better. He actually escalated. So that was a moment of leadership brilliance in my mind. So kind of not taking it personally, rising above it, and leaning in. He actually literally stood up and leaned forward. Is this how it's going? Bring it on. And I actually think that keeping several balls in the air, a lot of the things that you're trying to change, something that's going to be coming to resolution in the next couple of months, something that's years away, something that's somewhere in the middle, is really helpful because they don't all move forward. Some of them fail. Some of them have big setbacks. And if you're working with a group of people, having a few balls in the air at the same time is good for their morale. So if something does fail, they'll turn their attention to one of the things that's working, while you kind of reconfigure on the other one. And it just keeps your attention. It's hard to keep moving things forward all the time, so you can kind of move from project to project. So I like to have several things going at the same time, and I think that's sort of good organizationally. And the last is to kind of take the pulse of what's going on around you from time to time. Do you still have people? That's supposed to be a put your toe in the water, check the temperature slide. Do you still have people standing beside you? Because if you've gotten too far out ahead, or the project has changed, or there's been too much resistance and you haven't acknowledged it. So from time to time, you kind of have to take a step back and say, how is this going? Are we still on track? So with all of that, I've been in this role for 9 years now. Did all of these lessons actually have any benefit to us? And I'm going to say yes. We started with the conversation about all those smart people in the room who really weren't able to make anything change, who would have these great meetings and think great thoughts, and nothing really happened. So we restructured the entire staff to support the work of the volunteers so that the staff can make the phone calls, write the letters, take the minutes, schedule the meetings, offer the organizational knowledge that help people understand what's in the bandwidth. And the surgeon volunteers can think about surgery, surgical education, training, assessment, quality, all the things that we really want them to be doing. We restructured the whole governance so that everybody understood what their job was, what their duty was, what we expected of them, and how long we expected them to do it. The fiduciary board is the legally responsible board. That's an entirely different skill set. It's funny, everyone's like, I want to be on the highest board, the ones that's the bosses. Their agenda, audit, finance, governance, executive oversight. You still want to be on that board? Or do you want to be on the council where they're talking about education and training, research, assessment, diplomates and surgeons in practice, and diversity in the world of surgery? So different job assignments for people with different skill sets that we invite to work in that silo by their skill sets. Sometimes we invite people who don't particularly have a skill set, but we think they have promise and we want to train them up because we really want people to leave the board better than they came in, better prepared, with a new skill set, and also really prepared to work in a good governance situation or to create them. We created an entire world of competency-based appointments. We introduced EPAs, which is something that had been talked about for the last 25 years. We introduced tons of flexible leave options in residency, not just around parental leave, which is what we talked about last night, but any leave. You can use those. Actually, my dream is that someone will use the 5 and 6 training pathway to climb Mount Everest. That has not yet happened, but there's very specific windows of time. It takes a couple of months. Somebody is going to need to climb Mount Everest and have some time off from their training. We switched from a single exam to a modular exam that's more reflective of people's practices. We open an alternative pathway to certification for people who are trained in another country but live here. I don't like doors that are slammed permanently. So if you were born somewhere else, you could never be certified in the United States, meaning that you really might be locked into one job without the opportunity to move or leave. So that didn't seem fair to me. And then we introduced different ways of recognizing how people's practices change over time. So it's a lot of change. It's a lot of change and a lot of constituents to deal with, a lot of things that we're really proud of. So in the end, being in charge of something like that, our secondary goal of the governance redesign at the board was to allow surgeon leaders to be more powerful, to take your place at the hospital level, in the C-suite, the boards, local politics, national politics, please. The voice of surgeons is just so important. Our skill set is so valuable that if you have the basic foundation to also be effective, the sky's really the limit. And we wanted more people to have those skills. So if you're the one in charge, you have to attract good people. You got to make sure that they know that you're going to take good advantage of their time. You have to give them the support they need, the staff they need. You have to give them the power to make decisions, not undermine and to not second guess them. And in the end, it's all about making the highest and best use of their time. We have 1,200 volunteers, surgeon volunteers, donate their time to us. Some of them do it for weeks every year. Some of them do it for a couple of days at a time. We have surgeons visit us from other countries quite regularly and ask us about our system. And then they go, where do you get all those questions? We say, the surgeons write them. And they're like, how do you pay for that? I'm like, we don't. They go, we can't duplicate that. Can we buy your questions? So we have a culture that's really quite amazing. Surgical volunteerism, surgical commitment to the profession, try to support it. I think we're getting better and better at it. And I I hope that you leave this with the understanding of what can be done and how your time could be managed and how you can be appreciated and valued and how you can show that to other people because you have it here right now. And when it works really well, it's invisible, but there's actually a whole book of tricks and rules behind it. So thank you for listening to my TED Talk. I feel really strongly about it, and I hope I convinced you that it was.
Um, Thank you for your talk. I really appreciate it. Since you do have the power of being in such a strong leadership position at the board, as a graduating chief, the board exam is on July 29th. Any chance we can move it up a few days so we have some time before fellowship starts?
Is it July 29th?
Yeah,
It's usually like the 17th.
I know. Everyone's shocked.
I'm horrified. I will look at next year. I can't fix it this year. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but thank you for letting me know. That actually was completely below my radar. And as you're right, it's not because you're supposed to get a little bit of time off afterwards too.
Yeah.
There's the study thing, there's the move thing, but there's also the downtime thing. I'm sorry to hear that. We usually give 3 dates to Pearson. Pearson is a huge conglomerate that gives every test in the country to contractors, to hairdressers, to lawyers, maybe not lawyers, and they have this whole capacity study, but I didn't know that. So thank you. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I have two people
And
I'm sorry
then,
for now.
I guess just as another thing with the exam, talking about the transition and having time away from, not having a paycheck for some time. The exam's quite expensive. Just I don't know if there's like ways we can help, future residents, maybe programs paying for them or something that we can help to offset that cost to people.
You're not paying for his exam? Yes, it is expensive. We haven't raised the prices, and I think we've raised them once in the last 10 years. Yeah. That particular set, the once you're certified, it's $285 a year, which is less than dinner for two in a lot of places. I don't get too excited when people complain that that's expensive. I agree with you. And it's actually changed so when I was a resident, took the exam, nobody was doing fellowships. So you had already moved into an attending salary by the time you took it. And also this qualifying exam and certifying exam were separated by a year because everything was done on paper. So there were these long pauses, and now it's like all crunched into one space and you're still a fellow. So there's been this sort of slow change that we didn't fully appreciate. So I do have my eye on that. It's not going to help you. But that I think is the main pain point is it's the cost of initial certification. I agree with you about that.
Yeah. So on a similar theme, I'm a type 1 diabetic, and so applying for exam accommodations has been a challenge throughout all of medical education. I just wanted to thank the board for how easy it was. It was a little bit more challenging on the Pearson side, but I didn't have to go get 15 different letters from all of my physicians saying I've been diabetic since the age of 6 and all that. And so I just wanted to personally say thank you for that. That was much easier than expected.
My phone because I'm going to record you saying that. You can actually direct it to Barbara Jalbert Gherkins.
I did actually respond to the email and thank them as well during that process. But yes, thank you.
They get so many complaints, I'm sure you had a complaint. You're going to tell me how hard it was. So thank you. And I'm glad, more importantly, not all about me. I'm glad it was smooth for you. So.
Presentation, it was extraordinary. I just wanted to ask this topic, I think, kind of speaks to a lot of the leaders in the room, some of our more senior representatives, and then to us moving into leadership roles. But for our students who kind of look right now and they see this 20, 30 years down the road, do you have any advice of how they can start to apply this on earlier in their training?
Yes. So I think it's really to take yourself and your time seriously. You don't have to say yes to everything. Once you have started saying yes to things, you can't endlessly say yes. So at some point where you're in relative homeostasis for your time commitments, if you get an exciting new opportunity, you have to actually step off of something else. People tend to accumulate. They stay in the same committee forever. The committee didn't have terms. They don't want you to leave. So you're on the infection control committee for your hospital. You never really stop. You end up on a national committee, then you end up on, it goes on and on and on. So you have to remember to get off as well as on, give somebody else some room. Other people can get developed. You've already, to be brutal, you've already got it on your CV. It doesn't matter whether you did it for 5 years or 3, you were on the committee. So you got that kind of checkpoint. And you can really look ahead, saying yes to something. I find more and more now when we ask people to do things, they say, I want to talk to my partner, or I want to think about that. They don't just say, everybody used to just say yes, 100% of the time. Board called, yes. I want to talk to my partner. I want to think about it. One of my best friends, am I talking for too long now? Have we run over? One of my best friends in medicine is a woman who's my age. She's a colorectal surgeon. She has always had it together. I did not always have it together. I remember crossing paths with her in the middle of the night once. I was coming in to do a case and she was leaving. She had makeup on. It was like 2:00 in the morning. Her hair was like straight and blown dry. I was like, well, how does this even happen? And I did not have any of those things going on. And we were sort of ascending at the same time. She was a colorectal surgeon, so we weren't competing. It were 2 different worlds. And she was kind of put in position to be the president of the Colorectal Society. And she said no, because her daughter was going to be a high school senior 3 years from now when she was actually going to be president. And I was like, you what? I was like, you can't say no. You have to say yes. You have to say yes to everything because it won't come your way again. Like, you're the it girl now. I use that phrase a lot, but you won't be in 2 years. Someone else will be. You got to just say yes. And she was like, or not. And she did become the president later. She became the chair of their board later. She's a highly, respected emeritus, professor now. She actually retired at 60, which was shocking to me. But anyway, and I took the exact opposite path. I just said, yes, thank you. I think I probably caused more, probably personal life, family challenges than were entirely necessary. But that was the only way I could see. And that was the only way she could see. So it was really interesting to me that how well she paced things out. I was, in fact, president of SAGES when my older twins were high school seniors. So that's it. Just take your time seriously. For every yes, there's a no. It's kind of a useful phrase. And think about how you're going to prioritize all the things in your life.
I'm not a surgeon, so you'll have to correct all the mistakes I make in the question I'm going to ask you about competency.
As long as your punctuation is okay, it's going to be all right. Yeah.
Well, I'm a firm believer that only sentences in bullet lists deserve periods. And you're correct that if it's a phrase, there should not be a
Sentence
period after
fragments, yeah.
that. So you're speaking my language. I was a history major. So I have a question about competency-based assessment. You talked about it a couple different places. In your first allusion, and it's something I'm very curious about in medical education broadly. Your first allusion to it was the well-discussed report that, the graduates of surgery residencies do not feel competent. And in discussing that particular issue with colleagues, a number of them have pointed out to me that it's critical to distinguish perceived competence or confidence from competency. And that was useful in kind of getting a handle on that. But then I have a question about promotion in place. Mm-hmm. The AMA has been very interested in these promotion in place initiatives and as a way to develop another approach to competency-based assessment in the GME space. And John Andrews, in a meeting I was at with John Andrews at the AMA some weeks ago, said that I think 30 surgery residencies more or less are going to be implementing this year a promotion in place. And I asked John, I want to ask you the same thing I asked John, is it going to cut both ways? So, I mean, if we're rigorous in competency-based assessment and there's a determination the resident has not achieved the competency, we'll go the other way as well.
So I didn't talk about EPAs on purpose because I'll go on and on forever. So I'll try to keep this short. 45 programs have applied for promotion in place. I don't think they're all going to be able to pull it off because of the legal ramifications, the pay. I think we'll be lucky to end up with 10. But I love a proof of principle. I love any program demonstrating that something innovative can be done. It's always just a chink in the armor. So promotion in place, I think, is going to work. And so what that means is that if your EPAs demonstrate that you are practice ready, or at least ready for indirect supervision, that you can officially finish your training after 4.5 years, and you have to stay in the same institution as an attending for a mentored transition to practice for 6 more months. It's a pilot. It means you do your own cases, you charge, you're billed for by the hospital, but you have to stay for 6 months, and you have to have been sort of qualified for it by the EPAs and your promotion committee. That's what promotion in place is. It's not a go, no go at the end of training, right? So EPAs effectively, you should be able to tell in the 3rd year, the 2nd year, the 4th year, that someone is not progressing at a rate that looks like they're going to be practice ready. So you shouldn't be shocked at the end and be like, oh my gosh, you need to stick around longer. The part that we haven't gotten to yet, is we're only talking about competency-based assessment. We're not talking about competency-based education, which is the real goal. So the assessment should lead to a change in your educational curriculum. So if you do your one and only trauma rotation, I don't know where this would happen, but say at a PGY2 level, and you're assessed as requiring direct supervision, not ready to go out into the world, then you need another trauma rotation to get there. We're not built that way. We're built as a lock because of the very toxic and difficult to deal with interface between employment and education, which we are the only profession that has that, but it ain't going away. So we have to develop more flexibility within the education process, so that I don't think it's going to take people longer. I think if we actually use EPAs in the way that they're intended, so people are getting regular feedback, probably not every day, but if you're actually told what you need to do to learn to get to the next level twice a week, people will advance. It's the morass, it's the inefficiency of the process that's taking so long. So I don't think we're going to see many people who need to continue, and I think most of them are going to get caught quite a bit earlier. And yes, in the end, it should go both ways. Yeah. Did that answer your question? Okay, good. Zoomers.
I have to ask my usual question.
Oh.
What advice do you have for our learners and faculty? I think you give a lot of advice.
I think it's a long game. We talked a little bit last night about people kind of have spectacular failures along the way, and kind of recover and move on and have a really good and valuable, impactful career. It usually doesn't look exactly the way that you thought it was going to. We talked about some of the directors of the board failed the exam the first time. That's devastating. It's embarrassing. Usually at least your bosses know, your spouse definitely knows. You have to go back and study for another year, but good 15% of people fail the exam. Someone that you know, someone that you're working with, someone in this institution or department definitely did. And they're okay. They probably don't think about it every day. They probably never think about it. In fact, my mentioning it just now is the first time they thought about it in about 20 years. Grants don't get renewed. Personal disasters happen. Relationships fall apart. But there's always something to kind of keep you moving forward. And so I think it's just keep an eye on the long game. I wasn't a long game player, but I really think it's important now. I'm thinking now about the next long game, which is the next, 10 years of my life or 20 years of my life when I'm not doing this stuff anymore. And I think thinking about it, planning for it, allowing flexibility in your life to it, being serious about your time, where you want to put your time. Those are, and don't eat strawberries when it's not June. Just to be perfectly clear, do not eat fruit when it's out of season. That's my last comment.
Fair enough. We have a couple of gifts for you to recognize and thank you. We're very grateful to. I'm going to invite our chiefs to give their parting gifts to you, Dr. Buyske. Probably will stand in the middle to get a photo as well here.